Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good morning, everybody. Today we have this especially big class. We're combining two classes into one. Both the teacher training class and my Sutta Study Class. So I hope everybody is comfortable with it. Okay, we've been studying Sutta number 39 in the Majjhima Nikaya. This is called the Maha-Assapura Sutta. And this sutta is especially valuable because it gives a kind of thorough overview of the classical training of the Buddhist monk from the early stage up to the point of liberation. And so last time we covered roughly the first half of the sutta, but I can just do a brief review of what we covered. So in the sutta, the Buddha is instructing the monks that they should live up to the designation by which they refer to themselves and by which others know them. This is, in Pali, the word is samana, which is translated as recluse, somewhat inaccurately because the word recluse suggests somebody who lives completely isolated from society, whereas a Buddhist monk lives in a very close relationship with the lay community. But the word samana originally comes from the Sanskrit word shramana, which is based on the root shram, verbal root shram, which means to work, to strive, to undertake a labor. And so this word was used to designate those who had renounced the household life, went into homelessness, and undertook with special efforts, special striving, in order to realize what was considered the ultimate good, the highest goal in the Indian religious scene, the attainment of moksha, liberation, sambodhi, enlightenment, nirvana, nibbana. And so this is how the Buddhist monks came to be known on the wider Indian scene. People called them samana. Even the Buddha himself was called samana Gautama, the recluse or the ascetic Gautama. And so the Buddha is instructing the monks that they should live up to this designation. And so he wants to now he wants to explain to them what are the things that make one a true samana, a true ascetic, a true monastic person, a true recluse. And so he starts the discourse with, at the very base of the path, with the two qualities which are called shame and fear of wrongdoing. What is called shame is hiri in Pali, and the fear of wrongdoing is ottappa. The word hiri, though we translate it as shame, this translation is not so completely satisfactory, but the word hiri refers to what I call the inner sense of self-respect or the inner sense of one's own dignity, the dignity of one's character that protects one from engaging in any unwholesome actions. So it's a kind of internal monitor of one's behavior that restrains one from wrongdoing. The other quality, the twin quality that goes along with it, ottappa, is the fear of consequences, the consequences of wrongdoing. The fear of being blamed and criticized by others, the fear of punishment, perhaps by the authorities, and also the fear, in accordance with the law of karma, the law of karmic cause and effect, the fear of creating unwholesome karma that will lead to suffering in future lives. Okay, so based on this sense of shame or self-respect and the fear of wrongdoing, these, the Buddha says, are the two roots of morality. Then based on these two roots of the moral life, the ethical life, come three factors that constitute the ethical life. Actually, four factors. So the first is, this is in paragraph 4 of the sutta, purified bodily conduct. So one's conduct of body should be purified, clear and open, flawless and restrained. Then the next is verbal conduct, conduct of speech, which should also be purified, clear and open, flawless and restrained. And then third comes mental conduct, one's thoughts, one's intentions. Those should also be purified, clear and open, flawless and restrained. And then the fourth factor of the ethical life is right livelihood. So even in the case of the monastics, the Buddha says our livelihood shall be purified, clear and open, flawless and restrained. And in the case of monastic, this doesn't mean that the monk or nun is working at a respectable job within society, but this refers to the way in which they obtain the requisites, the material requisites. They shouldn't obtain them by cheating others, by performing like superstitious rites for others, by trying to deceive others, in any kind of way which is considered unscrupulous. But one lives in dependence on the kindness, the generosity of others, and in the Indian society, as well as in contemporary South Asian society, the lay people are always very happy to support well-disciplined monastics. Okay, so these four constitute the ethical life, and now we come into certain intermediate factors of training which form a kind of bridge from the ethical life to the development of the mind, to the development of the higher consciousness. So the first of these, this is in paragraph 8 of the sutta, is restraint of the senses. So one restrains the sense faculties so that when one sees any form with the eye, hears sounds, smells odors, tastes different flavors and so on, one doesn't grasp upon the object, but one trains the mind so that in the midst of perception, one is without greed for pleasant objects and repulsion or aversion towards disagreeable or unpleasant objects. Okay, along with restraint of the senses comes moderation in eating, so that in order to have the body in a fit condition for the meditative life, one should not eat too much or too little. If one eats too little by undertaking long fasts, then the body can become weak unfit for the practice of meditation. If one eats too much, then the body becomes dull and sluggish and heavy, and again it becomes difficult to do meditation. So what the Buddha teaches is one should practice, it's called in Pali, bojane matanyuta, which means knowing the right amount in regard to food. So it eats just enough to sustain oneself, keep oneself in good health, to end discomfort and to support the spiritual life. Then we come to the next factor, and this is called wakefulness. And that means that this is for the earnest meditator. During the day, he passes his day sitting in meditation, walking, doing the walking meditation, alternating sitting and walking meditation. During the first part of the night, again, continues sitting, walking. In the middle part of the night, perhaps for 4 or 5 hours, he'll lie down mindfully and sleep, then wake up in the early morning and again begin with the sitting meditation, the walking meditation. So this is wakefulness or vigilance. And this goes along with the next factor, which is called mindfulness and full awareness, or I prefer now, mindfulness and clear comprehension. In Pali, this is sati and sampajanya. So sati is what is usually translated as mindfulness, and sampajanya, Venbunyanamalli translated full awareness, which I don't particularly like, though I left it in this translation. Now I prefer clear comprehension. So sati, we could say, is presence of mind, keeping one's attention on what one is doing, being mindful of whatever one is doing, keeping oneself under observation in all the activities of day-to-day life. And then clear comprehension means knowing what one is doing, knowing the purpose of one's action, knowing how one is going about achieving one's purpose, having a clear comprehension of the activity in which one is engaged. And so the Buddha says that you should train thus, we will be possessed of mindfulness and clear comprehension. We will act with clear comprehension when going forward and returning, when looking ahead and looking aside, when bending and stretching the limbs, when wearing our robes and carrying the outer robe and the alms bowl, when eating, drinking, consuming food and tasting, when going to the toilet, when defecating and urinating, when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking and keeping silent. In all these conditions, one acts with clear comprehension. Okay, so this is the point that we ended last week, and now we continue. I'm still in the same paragraph on page 366. In each case, the Buddha is joining each new factor that he's introduced to the previous one, and then telling the monks that that much is not enough. So here he says, about the 4th line down, now, O monks, you may think thus, we are possessed of shame and fear of wrongdoing. Our bodily conduct, verbal conduct, mental conduct, conduct and livelihood have been purified. We guard the doors of our sense faculties. We are moderate in eating. We are devoted to wakefulness. And we are possessed of mindfulness and clear comprehension. That much is enough. That much has been done. The goal of the ascetic life has been reached. There is nothing more for us to do, and you may rest content with that much. But I inform you, I declare to you, O monks, you who seek the status of ascetics, do not fall short of the goal of the ascetic life while there is more to be done. So now the Buddha is going to explain what more has to be done, and this is going to be stated by way of overcoming the 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances are the main obstacles to the development of meditation. Okay, so here the Buddha says, now I'm in paragraph 12, what more is to be done? Here, a monk resorts to a secluded dwelling place. And then the Buddha mentions what are the ideal dwelling places for meditation. The forest, the root of a tree, a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, or a heap of straw. So in the Buddha's day, monks didn't live usually in nicely constructed monasteries with all the provisions, electricity, radios, televisions, computer outlets, but they would live in very simple huts, and during the day when they wanted to go for meditation, they would usually just choose the foot of a tree or open space, or sometimes just a cave or an overhanging rock. They would sit under the overhanging rock, and that would suffice for the whole day. Okay, so now the Buddha explains how the monk practices to overcome the 5 hindrances. Okay, so on returning from his alms round after the meal, he sits down, crosses his legs, holds the body erect, and establishes mindfulness in front of him. Then, abandoning covetousness or craving for the world, he abides with a mind free from craving. He purifies his mind from craving or sensual desire. Abandoning ill will, that's the first hindrance, by the way. The hindrance here is called covetousness, but it really signifies what is elsewhere called sensual desire. Then abandoning ill will and hatred, he abides with a mind free from ill will, compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. That he purifies his mind from ill will and hatred. Abandoning sloth and torpor, or dullness and drowsiness, he abides free from dullness and drowsiness, perceiving light, mindful and clearly comprehending. He purifies his mind from dullness and drowsiness. Abandoning restlessness and remorse, he abides unagitated with a mind inwardly peaceful, inwardly calm. He purifies his mind from restlessness and remorse. Abandoning doubt, he abides having gone beyond doubt, unperplexed about wholesome states or wholesome qualities. He purifies his mind from doubt. Okay, so here, very concisely, the Buddha indicates how the meditator overcomes the 5 hindrances. And if you just read the text, it seems that all you have to do is sit down, cross your legs, and start to meditate, and immediately one can get rid of the 5 hindrances. But actually, perhaps in the Buddha's day, there were many people we say that they had planted seeds in previous lives through the intensive practice of meditation, life after life. And so when the Buddha arose in the world, these people also came to rebirth in the environment of the Buddha. And so after hearing the Buddha's teaching, they can go off and meditate and achieve success very quickly and easily. But maybe there are some of you who are like that. But, well, for people slow, I include myself among them, most of our practice is dealing with the 5 hindrances, learning how to face them, how to understand them, and how to counteract them using different skillful methods of practice. Jason? 我有水一点，我要水一点的，要。Okay, so on one of the sheets that I handed out, I have a kind of detailed analysis of the 5 hindrances, and looking at various suttas that come in the Nikayas, we see that the texts deal in quite elaborate detail with how the hindrances arise and what are the most effective remedies or antidotes. Thank you. What are the most effective antidotes to the 5 hindrances? And this guy here, he's my perfect meditator. He sits down and not a thought in his mind. Just frees his mind from thoughts.
He's thinking of nuts.
No. No. You're misunderstanding me. I came back with Pante from California. I used to work 20 years in the computer business. Then I got weary of the world. So when I met Pante, I asked him to ordain me. I got ordained. And now I'm a chipmunk. You know, Bhante says he's a slow meditator. I don't have any problem with the 5 hindrances. Just sit down, focus on my breath, and the thoughts all gone. Maybe when we get back to the Taishu Hall, you can teach me a little bit how you do that. Very simple, Bhante. Your problem, you read too many books. You Westerners, you just think too much. So you sit down, you try to impress everybody. But I know you're just thinking, dreaming of this, dreaming of that, angry with this one, angry with that one. I'm not angry with anyone. I never get lazy, never get dull and drowsy. When I'm tired, I sleep. When I'm hungry, I eat. Most of the time, I just meditate. Okay, you behave yourself and don't interrupt the class. Okay, comic interlude is Okay, so if we look at the table, we see the first hindrance is given as sensual desire. And then some of the suttas explain how sensual desire arises, and it arises from what is called careless attention to an attractive object. The word careless attention is a very important word. This word and its opposite, very important. Can you see from the slides? Okay, so what's called careless attention, this is ayoniso manasikara. Also, it might be rendered as superficial attention, unmethodical attention, improper attention. So when one encounters an attractive object of the senses, then if one doesn't attend to it properly, if one attends to it carelessly, which means grasping upon the attractive features of the object, the sort of sensually enticing features of the object, of anything seen, heard, smelled, tasted, touched, then the desire or craving arises for that object. So that is how sensual desire arises. And of course, in the context of Buddhist meditation, usually the most sort of stubborn, persistent, obsessive form of sensual desire is sexual desire. So thinking about, for the monk, thinking about beautiful, beautiful women, about sexual pleasure. I don't know, maybe I think with women, I don't know the psychology, but maybe it's not so sensually rooted, but more rooted in terms of a kind of emotional fulfillment. At least that's what I've read in some of the psychological studies. But it could be a kind of longing, feeling of emotional unfulfillment if a woman is leading a monastic life. Okay, so the text proposed some of the antidotes for overcoming sensual desire. And so to begin with, the kind of provisional remedies is guarding the senses, that is, exercising restraint over the senses, and being moderate in eating. Because if one just allows oneself to eat anything that one is attracted to, and if one overeats, then that will provoke sensual desire. But then the special meditative object for counteracting sensual desire is what is called careful attention, that is yoniso manasikara, thorough attention, deep attention, proper attention to an unattractive object, what is called the asubha nimitta. And what is meant by the unattractive object usually is taking one's own body and then analyzing or investigating one's own body in terms of the classical 32 parts of the body. So one investigates one's own body from the top of the head down to the feet, from the feet, the bottom of the feet, up to the top of the head, bounded by skin. One investigates the body in terms of the 32 parts, hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin. Then beneath the skin, actually when one sees the body, any body, if you really reflect, what are you actually seeing? You know, the most beautiful supermodel in the world, most beautiful actress, most handsome actor. When you look, what are you actually seeing? What you actually see with the eyes are hair of the head. You might see some hair of the body. You might see fingernails, toenails. If they smile, you see the teeth, and you see the skin. That's all you're seeing. And then you imagine that the hair is cut off, put on the table in front of you. Some of the body hair is shaved off, put in front of you. The fingernails are clipped. The clippings of the fingernails are put in front of you. Some of the teeth are pulled out. Or all of them are pulled out in front of you. And maybe some of the skin peels off. You know, when somebody gets sunburned, the skin will peel off. Put the skin in front of you. And then you ask yourself, is this what I'm swooning over? And so if you just focus on these 5 bodily parts, put on a tray in front of you, all of that obsession and infatuation and intoxication goes away. Okay, but then we can go beneath the skin to see what is actually below the surface. Then we get muscles, nerves, bone, the marrow of the bone, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, large intestine, small intestine, stomach. Then inside the intestines there's the feces, in the head the brain, then there are the liquids or fluids of the body, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, tears, synovial fluid, that's the fluid of the joints, saliva, mucus, the oil of the skin, and urine. So those are the 32 parts of the body. So what one does meditatively is to go through the body, starting with one's own body in terms of these 32 parts, investigating them over and over. And as one does this, then one gets this impression of what is called the unattractive nature of the body. And that helps to diminish sensual desire. Okay, then to show the nature of sensual desire in the sutta, the Buddha gives a simile. Now I'm in paragraph 14. The similes come in the paragraph 14. Suppose a man were to take a loan and undertake business, and his business were to succeed so that he could repay all the money of the old loan, and there would remain enough extra to maintain a wife, then on considering this, he would be glad and full of joy. So this indicates the nature of the mind when one becomes free of sensual desire. When the mind is overcome by sensual desire, that is considered to be like being in debt to another person. But when one is free of sensual desire, that is like repaying the loan and being free of debt. Okay, so that is the special method for overcoming sensual desire. Normally what is said is that one chooses a principal meditation subject. So this could be something quite neutral, like the awareness of the breath, just attending to the in and out breathing. But sometimes for a person, as they go on trying to concentrate on the breath, the mind gets overrun by sensual thoughts. And so when this happens initially, it said one just becomes aware of the thought, drops it, and goes back to the main meditation subject, the breath. But if one observes that the mind is repeatedly getting obsessed by sensual thoughts, then for a time being one can put aside one's main meditation subject and temporarily take up the meditation on the parts of the body, the 32 parts of the body. Going through, there's a standard list. To get familiar with them, it's not enough just to read the list, but one has to get some idea of what these parts look like. It's a little difficult nowadays. In the Buddha's time, the monks used to go to the charnel grounds where bodies were discarded, and then the crows and other birds would come and tear open the bodies, and so they would be able to investigate what's inside the body. When I was living in Sri Lanka, we used to have like special arrangements with, you see, since Sri Lanka is a predominantly Buddhist country, many of the medical doctors, most of them are Buddhist. And so we used to cultivate special relationships with the doctors who would, they would be the judicial forensic specialists whose job is to perform the autopsies. And so sometimes we would go to the hospital and get special permission to go into the autopsy room, and then the doctor they'd bring out the corpse, and I don't know if you've ever seen a corpse, not decked up in a funeral home, but this is a corpse actually laid out completely naked in the mortuary. It looks just like a person who's sleeping. But then the doctor will take the scalpel and start cutting it open, and we want to call out, "Don't do that to him." He's still alive, but as he's cutting, there's no reaction. Then he'll open up the body. I hope I'm not going to horrify anybody. And start pulling out different organs, telling us this is the heart, this is the liver, here's the small intestines, these are the large intestines, this is the spleen. And these are things we never normally see. And it's quite very valuable to see the inside parts of the body. So then one gets an image of these parts that one could use for the practice of this meditation. Yeah, okay, so one takes the 32 parts, so one puts aside the main meditation subject and focuses on the 32 parts, going through them over and over till one gets a very strong and clear impression of this unsatisfactory, unattractive nature of the body. And then when the sensual desire diminishes, then one can go back to the primary meditation subject, like the breath. Okay, now we come to the second of the 5 hindrances. This is ill will, or anger, or hatred. And this is said to arise from careless attention to a repugnant object, to something which is undesirable, disagreeable, unpleasant. Usually ill will arises towards people, towards whom one feels some kind of aversion. And so if there's a person whose manner seems gruff and crude Their speech is grating and offensive. They have a kind of rough manner. They create all sorts of trouble for you. And if you keep on focusing upon them and upon the way they behave, the way they speak, the way they look, then ill will arises towards one. Okay, so how does one overcome this ill will? So the main method that the Buddha teaches for overcoming ill will is the meditation on loving kindness. This is what we call in Pali metta bhavana. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's actually Kama Chanda. Yeah. The A with the bar over it it's a long vowel. Kama Chanda. Then the next one is ill will is Vyapada. Yeah. Vyapada. And its condition is Patiga Nimitta. I should have actually asked, after explaining the first hindrance, whether there were any questions about the overcoming of sensual desire.
Okay, how does that reconcile with the view of
Yeah.
how does that reconcile with the view of fresh human life?
Okay. I mean, human life is regarded as, I'll just repeat the question so that it gets onto the tape. He asked how to reconcile this view of the human body with the idea of the precious human life. Human life is considered precious according to Buddhism because it provides the special conditions, almost the unique conditions for setting out on the path to liberation. Human life has the advantage of, it said that it's not too short, it's not too long, so that we become deluded by the length of a life, and yet it's not too short, so it's long enough for us to undertake a process of spiritual development. There's a mixture of happiness and suffering in the human realm, so that through the suffering we can get motivated to undertake the practice of Dhamma, and because there's happiness we can make progress and experience the fruits of practice. So for this reason human life is pleasant, or it's considered something very precious and desirable. But this is, I say, the meditation on the unattractive nature of the body is something being used like a skillful device in order to overcome the craving for sensual pleasure. And I should also point out that according to the meditation manuals, it is not recommended for everybody. People have different temperaments, and so for the person who tends to be angry or hateful, don't recommend the meditation on the unattractive nature of the body. For a person who tends to be morose and gloomy, it should be practiced. But it's recommended especially for the person with strong sensual streak in their character, because that is the appropriate medicine. Yes, please.
I don't know if I can quite formulate this.
Just try it.
Okay. Talking about sensual desire in monks
Yeah,
as usually focusing towards the sexual,
yeah,
whereas psychologically in nuns and women
yeah,
there is a whole range of emotional components.
yeah, yeah.
Now, traditionally, have there been meditation practices analogous to the 32 parts
Yeah.
that deal with the articulation of the complexities of the emotion?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I have to say that it's something I haven't really seen
Yeah.
treated adequately in the Buddhist texts. One would have to say, quite frankly, that there seems to be almost a simplification of what you call this broad range of emotions, as if all the emotions of, say, the household life, a feeling of, well, maybe there is something of, because the texts sometimes speak about different emotions which are similar, but still they display subtle differences. So the text, they distinguish between sensual desire or sensual craving, which is sometimes called raga, translated as lust. Then there's an emotion called pema. Pema is affection. So this would be the kind of emotional attachment to another person, not necessarily just rooted in sensuality, but it's based on the kind of affinity of character, admiration for the person's personal traits. And the pema can both have an attachment connected to it, and also there's a kind of pema which is not connected with attachment. This would be, especially with good or very virtuous people, they will have an affinity or resonance with one another, and an affection and admiration for one another, which is not based on a kind of craving or need within the person, but in an admiration for what is good. Okay, so there's raga, which is sensual craving. There's pema, affection with attachment, and pema without attachment. And then there's metta, which is a kind of universal loving kindness.
So, are there, in the text,
Yeah.
strategies for dealing with pema with attachment?
I don't know anything laid out quite like this scheme,
Okay.
but what I would say is that this is, again, it's a little strong medicine, but it could be something like a meditation on death, that I have to be, yeah, maybe this is the one. It's a reflection that I have to be parted and separated from everyone and everything that is near and dear to myself. And so, when one practices this, even if one continues to live in, close association, it doesn't mean that one renounces and becomes a monk or a nun, but one continues to live with husband, wife, children, and so on. But if one of them dies, one can accept it with some degree of mental balance, not getting overpowered by emotion, because one has trained the mind to reflect that there must be separation. Whenever there's union or meeting, there must be eventual separation.
Doesn't chapter 20 have a lot of antidotes as to in the Majjhima Nikaya?
Sutta number 20.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, Sutta number 20,
It's not there from the Maha-Assapura.
yeah, it doesn't actually mention the specific antidotes, but what it says is that when unskillful or unwholesome thoughts arise, then one should overcome them by applying the appropriate opposite type of thought. But I think the sutta itself doesn't specify what those opposites are. That we get from other suttas and from the commentaries. Okay, there are a few questions from the internet. One says, moderation in eating means that no self-respecting Buddha can become fat, like the fat Buddha in the Chinese temples.
That's the school.
I'm puzzled. How do you answer that? Well, actually, that figure in the Chinese temples, he ain't really a Buddha. That's actually Maitreya Bodhisattva. And you see, there was Chinese belief that somebody who's happy eats a lot, right? When they eat a lot, they get fat. That's why they show Maitreya Bodhisattva. He's going to be the next Buddha. And so he's very happy. Since he's happy, he eats a lot, and he gets fat. Right, Bhante? I don't know, but maybe some of our... is that the explanation? Okay, second question. What is the meaning of recipient and light? Okay, that I'll come to as we go on. Asubha meditation, that's the meditation on the unattractive nature of the body. Is it similar to aversion therapy and conditioning to cure some forms of addiction? Maybe, I don't know what aversion therapy is. Okay, unskillful practice of Asubha meditation led some monks to commit suicide. So is it safe to practice without supervision by an experienced teacher? Yeah, there's an account that comes in the Vinaya, also in one of the suttas, that it's a very strange incident. The Buddha taught the Asubha meditation, the meditation on the impure, unattractive nature of the body. Then he went off immediately after into isolated meditation. Was it for 2 weeks or 3 months? I don't remember. But he's not available. Then these monks are practicing the Asubha meditation, and they become revolted by the body, and so they start killing one another or asking some other person to kill them. And so when the Buddha comes out of meditation and looks at the Sangha, he's wondering, where have all the monks gone? Then Ananda reports they've all, well, not all, but many of them have committed suicide.